But before that, a question for you. How green is your home? Is your loft well insulated? Do you have solar panels? As a nation, we are not doing enough, apparently, to make our homes energy efficient. If we ever want to meet international targets, it's reckoned a third of the nation's emissions comes from electricity and gas central heating. And a new report estimates we need to refurbish 1.4 homes every minute for the next 30 years to stand any chance of meeting those legal requirements. Well, a man who knows exactly how to make our homes greener is Harvey from the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre in Swindon. And I'm asking him what he makes of these latest figures.
It's some number. It doesn't surprise me, actually. I mean, 18 million homes in the UK have got little or no insulation because they were built pre-1980s when there was no legal requirement to meet any thermal performance at all. So no, even though it does sound like quite a shocking figure, it doesn't particularly surprise me.
So where is the heat going? Is it through the roof? Is it drafty windows? What are the main problems?
Good question, and that is probably the number one question that we get asked in the centre in terms of people that come in with existing homes and are looking to improve them. So if you imagine a picture of a house, the number one culprit for the loss of heat is through the walls, which is not what most people would think. So 35% of your heat will be lost through the walls. The next biggest, 25%, is through the roof, and then the heat can be lost through doors, windows, and actually through the floor of the building as well.
So once you've identified that, how easy is it then to stop that happening?
Well, there's a number of things that you can do. It's all about insulation. I mean, that is the number one top priority that everyone should think about if they're looking to make their homes feel warmer and more comfortable, really. So walls is probably one of the trickier ones to tackle, but you can do it. So it depends when your house was built. So if it was pre-1950s, it might not actually have a cavity. So we're used to building with brick and blocks or timber frame in this country, and there's normally a cavity between the external and the internal walls that you can then fill with insulation if it hasn't already been done so. So people might have seen these methods of blowing insulation. So basically companies will come in, drill small holes in the wall and then blow in either foam or recycled paper insulation or rock wool that's made out of a mineral material, and that basically adds as a bubble wrap, a layer, an extra layer in the house that stops the heat leaking out of the walls.
I mean, I remember my dad built his own home in the mid-60s, and I can remember when the cavity wall men came, and as a kid just being so excited because they did this magic foam that was going into the house, thinking, well, that's going to be my bedroom, but of course it was just going into the cavity wall bit.
That's right.
But it's amazing how much difference that can make.
It is, but it does deteriorate over time as well. And again, the quality of products going into the insulation has changed over the years. So that insulation that your dad was putting in the 1960s, even if it was kind of cutting edge then, it probably needs looking at again now.
I'll tell him, right?
Yeah. So we have a number of companies in the centre that actually do thermal surveys of a house. So you might have seen these images where you get different colours depending on the heat loss shown coming out of a house. So they will actually be able to do a survey, and then you can look at the pictures with them and identify where the heat's actually disappearing from your home as well. If you haven't got a cavity wall, there is something called external wall insulation, which is exactly that really. It's putting a layer of insulation on the outside of your wall and then finishing it with a render product so that it's still weatherproof.
We're going to speak to a chap who's actually made his house so energy efficient that he earns money each year. But he reckons actually even new homes being built now aren't really as energy efficient as they could be. Is he right?
He probably is right, to be honest, because most of our homes are built by 8 big developers across the UK, and the developers all have shareholders and they build to make a profit, so they're only obliged to meet the minimum building regulations, so they're not thinking particularly about your kind of ongoing comfort and your energy bills when you're living in the home. They're thinking about building a house to standard for the minimum cost, really.
What about What about my neighbours who've got those solar panels on their roofs? Are they smugly looking out of their warm house at me going, look at us saving all this money? Are they very efficient or not?
Well, the answer is it depends when they had them installed, because a number of years ago, the government were really pushing for people to install solar PV, which are the panels that produce electricity. So they were offering really generous incentives, something called the feed-in tariff. So they were actually paying you for the electricity that you were generating, and then you could sell that back to the grid. Obviously, you could also use the electricity that you're generating yourselves. Those tariffs have reduced and reduced over the years. It was really to create a demand and create an interest for solar panels. So it can still be worth installing solar panels, but you have to think very carefully about what we call the payback period. So how long is it going to take you to actually get the money that you spent on the panels back? The thing with this country is the solar panels that generate electricity generally generate electricity during the day, and that's when most people tend to be at work or doing the school runs and things. So you have to think about what you can actually do with that electricity and can you use it. There are some really neat systems coming into the market now where you can actually store the electricity in like a big battery system, and then you can actually use it in the evenings when you're actually at home, or perhaps to charge an electric car, which is something that we're seeing more of now.
Okay, one thing, Harvey, one thing, if we could today think, I'm fed up with these energy bills, plus, we all want to look after the climate, what one thing, simple thing, could we all do to make a difference?
I would, if you've got a loft, go up into the loft and have a look at the insulation that you've got in there. So you should have a minimum of 300 millimetres, 30 centimetres of insulation. Now, if your loft's anything like my parents, it will be absolutely stacked through with boxes, from decades and decades gone.
It's your stuff, Harvey.
You could do a whole show on what people have in their lofts, I'm sure. But I would look at your loft insulation. 25% of the heat in a house will disappear through the roof. So have a look. If you've got insulation, but then you've put old suitcases and boxes and mementos that you're not quite sure what to do with on top of it, and the insulation's crushed down, squashed down, it's only as good as the depth that it's kind of squashed to. So you can get these really neat wooden sort of chipboards that sit on stilts. So it means you can have the insulation nice and soft and fluffy, at least 300 millimetres below it, but still use the loft for storage space, which everyone tries to do.
So basically, size does matter. Harvey Fremlin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Harvey from the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre in Swindon. So